Good afternoon to you. 507 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Emily Jashinsky joins us this hour. We'll take a look at the left's effort to get rid of Joe Biden. Very much underway. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. A lot more questions than answers about how a would-be assassin almost killed Donald Trump this past weekend and did kill a great American, Corey Comparatori. My Corey reminded me how to say this. It's Corey Comparatori, who was killed by that assassin this weekend. And a nation mourns that. He was recognized last night. Don Jr. did such a good job of bringing him up and paying honors to Corey last night. But it's just awful what we saw. So now Congress demanding answers from the head of the Secret Service. What went wrong here? And among the people asking these questions, Congressman Mark Green from Tennessee's 7th Congressional District. He's the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee and joins us now. Congressman, good to have you back with us, sir.
Vince, always good to be with you.
Will Kim Cheatle, the head of the Secret Service, be testifying before your committee, sir?
We have sent a request and not heard back. When I talked to her on Sunday, the day after the event, she said she'd be transparent and come to anything we asked her to come to. She did. I like going on a little honey route, so I asked if I don't get it, I'll do a subpoena. Mm-hmm. Comer subpoenaed from the beginning, from the get-go, and I think he's got her on Monday. Monday, we will be visiting the site. So my Homeland Security team is going to go to Pennsylvania and look at the ground, walk the ground, get up on the buildings ourselves. But our goal is to have her come on Tuesday. Hopefully she'll say yes, and we don't have to issue the subpoena. But immediately after that hearing, we are holding a hearing with the local law enforcement that was on the ground there, state police, et cetera. So we'll at least have that piece.
That hearing will be Tuesday afternoon? Is that what I'm hearing, or is it going to be?
Yeah, that's Tuesday afternoon, or Tuesday. The time is all dependent upon, what the previous hearing is. It's going to be what we call round two, but it'll be one hearing.
Got it. So you'll speak first to the Secret Service and then to local law enforcement and see if you can get the story straightened out. When you go Monday to visit the site in Butler, Pennsylvania, will there be officials there to help guide you through what you're looking at?
Yeah, the local officials have agreed. The Tennessee or the Pennsylvania state police have been incredible. I mean, they have been so good to work with and are set. So has the FBI. To be completely honest, I posed the question when I talked to the deputy director. I think it was on Monday, and I said, "Hey, can we go to the site?" He said, "As soon as it's not a active crime scene, yes."
Yes.
And so we've talked to them every single day, and the FBI is like, "Okay, we're clearing it today," meaning today. And you guys can get in there on Monday.
One of the things that I've been focusing on this week is when the various radio calls were made by police officers. I would like to know specifically what time radio calls were made, because it seems to me that it would reveal to us quite a bit about just how long President Trump was vulnerable on that stage. We heard from local officials that the cops who tried to climb up to the roof to confront the shooter, they saw him, the one cop, he fell down, and then the two of them, while they were on the ground, two police officers, one who was boosting, the other one who fell, they made radio calls at that very moment to warn everybody that there was a shooter there. Those radio calls must exist somewhere, Congressman. I would imagine if they're local cops, they have scanner audio.
Yeah, we've requested all the audio from both Secret Service, all the networks. We want the transcripts of all those.
Yeah, that's going to give us a lot of information, because yesterday. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and the deadline for that request is tomorrow. The subpoenas have already been filed, or have already been drawn up, and we will file them immediately after the deadline, within a minute.
Okay. Yeah, we'll learn a lot from that if you get a hold of it. God willing, you do.
Yeah.
The other piece here is we heard yesterday that the Secret Service gave at least some sort of bare bones brief to United States senators broadly. And in that brief, the Secret Service seemed to indicate that they had their eyes on this shooter for nearly an hour, and then specifically a 20-minute window ahead of President Trump being shot, where the snipers were looking at this guy on the roof. Can you begin to make sense of how a guy could be on a roof like that and they allow President Trump on that stage?
So the coordination between the local law enforcement and the Secret Service is one of the biggest issues here. And immediately after we got word of this, we started mapping it out. The intel that came from the nation state actor, and we put it into phases. So, but one of the key ingredients is actions on the objective. And sorry for me speaking like a military guy, but I'm an ex flight surgeon for a special operations unit. I was an Army Ranger infantry officer for 10 years.
Right on.
So the actions on the objective, were there good rules of engagement and communications between Secret Service and law enforcement? Law enforcement, 62 minutes before shots rang out, identified this individual as a suspicious person. We can't tell if they actually had him detained for a second, or if they just spotted him across the way, but they lost track of him. And so we had 62 minutes where there was a concern. What was the threshold to hold the event, to keep it from going forward? These are all the questions that we're going to put people under oath and get the answers to. Clearly that guy in the scope, why would they not act? Why would they not say, we need to hold the president, right? Those are questions that have to be asked. It is possible, and I was just thinking of this as you were asking the question. I suppose it is possible that they thought maybe that was a local law enforcement guy who hopped up there. I don't know, but you don't just hop up into another area without notifying, or you might get shot. So I can't imagine. One, the communications between these guys is critical. What that counter sniper was thinking as he was sitting there looking at that guy for 20 minutes, we got to get to the bottom of that.
That's
clearly.
Right. Well, 20 minutes is a lot of time because if it was 20 minutes, we checked the time yesterday, and I know, of course, your committee's looking at this really closely. If it was 20 minutes, that means it's about 10 minutes of time before President Trump gets on stage, and then Trump kind of walks across that stage for just a few minutes, and then he starts speaking, and he's only speaking for 6 minutes until he's shot. So. That's a massive amount of time for that counter sniper, to deconflict who's on top of that roof, to make the call. Hey, who's standing up there?
Exactly. That's exactly right. There was plenty of time. It didn't happen. Why? Yeah. We got to put those guys under oath and ask them.
What's going on with the Secret Service director, Kim Cheatle? For her to come out in public and declare that one of the reasons the Secret Service agents weren't on that roof was because it was sloped. That's the most obvious lie I've heard in Washington in a while, and I've heard a lot of lies in Washington, but that's the most obvious one. I mean, we see Secret Service agents on sloped roofs all the time.
Yeah, the White House actually has a bigger pitch in places than that one. Look, I mean, that very clearly shows, at a minimum, incredible stupidity. Or she thinks that we're all stupid. I don't know, but that can't stand. And there are several other things I don't want to go into until we get her in front of the committee before I verify it. But that make me, I'm already kind of calling for her resignation. She's clearly not the right person for this job.
Of course. I mean, you're a military guy. You know how this works. If your organization screws up, and it screws up this spectacularly, you've got to go. I don't care what a nice boss you are. I don't care if you bring donuts every week. I don't care what the circumstances are. Your one job is to protect these guys. One of them was just shot in the head. So your time to go.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of like the commander on the battlefield where troops' lives are at stake. I mean, you relieve the guy on the spot.
No question, and that's what she deserves. But in the meantime, so long as she's in the job, she can answer some of your questions. So give us, Congressman.
And even after, I mean, we can subpoena anybody. So we're going to get her to answer questions whether she's in the job or not.
Good. Yeah, that'd be great if you could get those answers. Congressman, what are the things that you're looking at right now that you could give us a sense that are really glaring to you in terms of looking at this entire event and saying, I need a clear answer on this and quickly?
Yeah, we'll go back to the phases, right, that I mentioned before. In the assessment phase, some team leader was sent out there to look at the ground and decide where to put people and which assets were necessary for the mission. So they decide to cover that building. This is in a conversation with me. Cheatle told me on Sunday that the 8 o'clock counter sniper was going to cover the top of that building. That's why there wasn't someone put on that building. Now, she didn't say anything in that call about the slope of the building. This is on Sunday. So, okay, the assessment guy made a decision to leave that top of that building unsecured or there wasn't a body on it.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look behind that building, though, there's this narrow alleyway, which a basic trainee soldier would know has to be observed continuously, or a bad guy can sneak up on you. If you want a sealed 360-degree perimeter, that has to be watched. The fact that there wasn't someone 24/7, every second of every minute of this operation, watching that blind spot is absolutely absurd. It is stupid, and I want to know who made that decision, and I want to know what their thinking was, just so I can understand. But that was a bad decision, and someone needs to be held accountable for that.
Right, and if you can't secure that location, wouldn't you put up a visual obstruction or something in order to keep a shooter from having a vantage point?
Well, you could do that too. Absolutely. You could also put a drone over it to watch it. I mean, keeping eyes on it isn't challenging. It was daylight. It was 6 p.m.
Yeah, no, it's madness. The other piece that I have questions about: 3 hours before the speech, the shooter apparently entered the secure area carrying a rangefinder. That's the reporting this week. And then walked around inside the secure area, then left, presumably to retrieve the gun. The next time he pops up, at least for the public, is on the roof.
They believe he had the gun there, hidden there. He came days before, or maybe a day before, and then he came earlier that morning, and then came back with the rangefinder, and then came the last time, as I understand it. Now, this gets a little cloudy, and I'm not looking at my notes exactly right now. But as I understand, he came a day before, cased the joint, came the next morning, and then came with the rangefinder through the magnetometers, and then came back again.
And you said he may have bunked the gun. Did he have the gun stored on the roof? Is that the belief?
Yeah, well, we don't really know, but it's anticipated that he hid the gun there somewhere.
And we don't know at what point he would have hid the gun, just sometime in advance.
In that advanced time, yes. That's the suspicion. I can't say that that's verified, but I can say that's the suspicion, because how do you carry an AR through a magnetometer with Secret Service? I mean, that doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. But my understanding is that building was outside of the magnetometer secured area, that it was outside the perimeter.
That's true. Someone, again, in that assessment team made the decision that would be outside the perimeter. So yes, in fact, that is the case. You're right.
And then there were multiple photos taken of him by law enforcement. One of the weird things about this is, one, obviously they've identified him as a suspicious person. So how did they allow this to happen? But two, did anyone talk to him? You mentioned early in our conversation that he may or may not have been detained at some point. Were there any law enforcement officers who had any conversations with this guy whatsoever, or were they just taking pictures of him from a distance?
So that's the question that I haven't gotten the answer to. And in the way they handle these calls from the White House, and the White House kind of managed the administration kind of managed the call that was yesterday. And you can't sit there and cross-examine kind of question. So the question of when they determined he was suspicious, was it an interaction with law enforcement where they're talking to him, or was this they spotted him across the crowd? So that's another thing I've got to get the detail on. But we'll be asking that question on Tuesday with the local guys, right? So we can ask them, who was it that saw the guy? Oh, okay. How did they interact? How did you lose track of him? Did you call Secret Service and they say not to detain him, and then he's let go, and then okay, no, go get him? We've got to get a lot more detail on that.
Yeah, it's shocking how little we know at this point. Congressman Mark Green, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. Sir, thank you very much for taking some time. Best of luck as you dig.
Yeah, thanks for digging into it with us. Thank you.
Amen. Thanks for being on today. It's 5:21. I'm glad Congressman Green and the House Homeland Security Committee are requesting all of that scanner audio from all of the cops on the ground, Secret Service, local police, Pennsylvania state troopers, anybody who was involved, whatever radio channels they were on. Really critical that we get a sense of their communications and how that all went down exactly, down to the second. But it seems like so many problems. Lots of time to keep Donald Trump off of that stage, and they didn't. Donna is in Frederick, as usual, line 1. Donna, good afternoon. Thank you for waiting. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hi, good afternoon. It's so great to talk to you, Vince. I've been enjoying your show, enjoying my popcorn while enjoying your show, dare I say.
Well, there's so much fighting going on the left, and Joy Reid sounds like a complete idiot as usual. There's just so much to eat popcorn too, Donna.
Absolutely. Pure entertainment. And, while we're on the subject, I was thinking about January 6th and their committee hearings. Well, we need to flip the script on them and call it the July 13th Select Committee and, expose some, and not all people in these three-letter agencies are criminal, but I think a few may be. And I think that's going to be the exposure and disclosure that we need going forward in order to save America.
Well, at the very least, criminal negligence. I mean, look at what they allowed to happen on that stage. Yeah. The President Trump gets shot in the head, and everyone's like, oh, no, I have full confidence in the people who allowed that to happen to keep staying their job. It's idiotic. But here's why I like this idea, Donna. One, I want answers. The January 6th committee was garbage. It was a propaganda exercise by Nancy Pelosi to try and demonize her political opponent. But what we desire is the truth. What we want is real answers. And if it takes a big, flashy committee with all sorts of subpoena power and an aggressive effort to get to the bottom of this, perfect. Let's do it. And here's the ancillary benefit, Donna. Yeah. The secondary benefit to this, it's going to force the American people to reckon with what actually happened, the venom the left was spewing leading up to an assassination attempt like this, the conditions that they created for an assassination attempt like this. They might say, oh, we don't want that to happen during an election year. Tough. Actually, it should happen during an election year because voters should go to the polls with every ounce of information they can possibly get. Republicans should launch a J13 committee and carry it all the way to Election Day and beyond.
Yes, and really, when you think about it, Vince, pure election interference via an assassination attempt. And, God bless President Trump. I really do believe the hand of God has been on him and with him and will be with our country going forward. I think we're going to hear all the left conspiracy theories, but we'll move on past. We'll get them in the White House.
That's right. Yeah, well, they can pass around their conspiracy theories. Meanwhile, we're grounded in the truth, and boy, we want so much more of it. All right, stay with us. I've got Emily Jashinsky joining us in a moment. It looks like we've got a lot of breaking news. Some more developments on the effort to oust Joe, and the people who are close to Joe are now fighting back. Fascinating stuff coming up. Good afternoon to you. It is 5:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We're making sense of the news. You can join us 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Keeps getting messier and messier. The left privately, publicly trying to eject Joe Biden from office. The latest news this hour. New York Times headline now, people close to Biden say he appears to accept he may have to leave the race. Just published within the last 15 minutes. Several people close to President Biden said Thursday they believe he has begun to accept the idea that he may not be able to win in November and may have to drop out of the race, bowing to the growing demands of many anxious members of his party. One of the people close to him warned that the president had not yet made up his mind to leave the race after 3 weeks of insisting that almost nothing would drive him out. But another said that, quote, reality is setting in, end quote, and that it would not be a surprise if Mr. Biden made an announcement soon endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as his replacement. They say this account is based on interviews with 4 people close to the president, all of whom described the situation as extremely delicate and spoke on the condition of anonymity to avoid offending the president. Now, one other piece here before we get to our guest. NBC News has a report that says the opposite. People close to Biden push back on calls for him to step aside. This report just out, a source close to President Biden is blaming senior Democratic leaders for, quote, giving us Donald Trump, end quote, as calls for Biden to step aside grow. Quote, can we all just remember for a minute that these same people who are trying to push Joe Biden out are the same people who literally gave us all Donald Trump? In 2015, Obama, Pelosi, Schumer pushed Biden aside in favor of Hillary. They were wrong then, and they are wrong now, the source said to NBC. Oh, this is getting more delicious by the minute. Let's bring in Emily Jashinsky now. She's a D.C. correspondent for UnHerd and the co-host of Counterpoints. She joins us on the phone. Emily, good to have you back with us.
Hey, Vince. I'm in Milwaukee for the RNC now, too, so it's good to be with you.
Well, you're at a place that is unified and happy. Meanwhile, here in Washington, Democrats are miserable and divided. And I'm looking at all these headlines, and it's so funny. Everyone keeps acting like, oh, these were private conversations. Well, then how come you and I know so much about them, Emily?
It's fascinating, right? I think also one of the things you said I wanted to just underscore, too, is that it seems as though some people in Biden's inner circle are actually trying to force him out of the race by leaking this. And, funny enough, a guy you know a lot about, Bob Menendez, actually insinuated the same thing was happening to him just over the course of the last couple of days, that people were leaking what they knew privately was about to happen in order to ensure that it actually does happen. That, if you leak that that X is going to happen, then X will happen and it will prevent Y from happening. And so I think that's a lot of what's happening here with people leaking about Joe Biden. Clearly these stories are true, and the NBC News report is spin. I would expect any hour. It could be days. It could be a matter of a couple of days. It could be a matter of hours. But, news like this, good on the weekend, right?
But
it's
you're
good on
right.
The weekend news dump while the RNC is happening.
Yeah, but you're right, though, that all of this is being done in a coordinated way in order to make it feel inevitable, that Biden has to go because, the media already reported it. Do you want to, ruin the ending of the story for everyone by not stepping down? You've got to do it now. It's so inevitable. But here's why I think that there's still an open question of whether or not it actually occurs. I said earlier, Emily, that Joe Biden has never fired anyone who has committed catastrophic failure on his watch in his administration. Why would he start with himself?
That's a good point. Yeah, it doesn't usually bother him. Incompetence is usually just fine.
Yeah.
No, I know. And I think, one of the reasons people are eager to start leaking this is because they want to get on with it. They know that there's a ton of work to do in consolidating around, whether it's Kamala Harris or somebody else. They have a machine that is programmed to go in one direction right now, and that is to, run Joe Biden. And it may seem like no big deal because it's the same party, just a different candidate at the top of the ticket, but it's a huge deal, obviously, because we're talking about, signs have been printed, all kinds of things are already in motion. You're trying to turn the Titanic around at this point. So they're eger to get on with it, and they don't want to see Biden kind of dilly-dallying. They don't want him to, for instance, recover from COVID and have a different conclusion, come to a different conclusion, something like that. So they're leaking it, which, to your point, maybe does suggest that there's still some doubt about whether it actually happens. Otherwise, why try to force his hand?
Right. Obama getting in on the action now. The New York Times reporting that Obama is telling allies that he would like Biden to consider getting out of the race, which is the most Obama thing ever. Why don't you just tell him? Why don't you call the guy and just be like, hey, you should get out of the race? But instead, Obama has to leak that he's telling allies that he's asking Biden to consider maybe possibly leaving. What do you make of Obama's name finally coming up here?
Pretty interesting because it started, it's hard to say whether this was leaked or planted, but it started coming out about how close he was to George Clooney after George Clooney wrote that op-ed.
Yeah.
So sort of reading between the lines on that, it seemed like some of this had been coordinated by Obama, who had been told that Clooney was going to publish the op-ed and didn't try to walk him back from running the op-ed. Mm-hmm. So it seemed like he was, this was inevitable. But to your point, if you feel so strongly about this, Barack Obama, this is your vice president. If you feel so strongly that this man should not be president, maybe it's time to actually say something publicly. Maybe it's time to be blunt with him privately, and maybe it's time then to come out and tell the American people why. Because you're the one who thrust this man into the vice presidency, which vaulted him to the presidency. So it would be very interesting to hear from him at this time.
Yeah, and it's sort of fascinating the extent to which this has created a bit of a civil war that's spilling out into public view, because Biden loyalists, to the extent that they exist, have been complaining that they do think that Obama's people are behind this. If you look at the Pod Bros and the various, David Axelrod, all the former Obama officials, George Clooney, obviously very close to Obama. They love vacationing together in Italy. If you look at all of these people, you start to think, well, what do they all have in common? Well, they're all Obama loyalists, and they're all saying Joe needs to go.
Yeah, although, it's starting to feel like it's completely widespread throughout everybody except those 5 Biden staffers and all Biden loyalists who all work in the White House. It can't be that much more than 5 people at this point. It's starting to feel so widespread that I can't even say, point a finger at any one individual. It's the polling. It's the American people. That AP NORC poll that came out earlier this week that showed 2/3 of Democrats wanted another candidate.
Yes.
And at a certain point, there's just nothing you can do. You just have to. And it's crazy because it's also just, and you know this, Vince, but it's the conversation among Biden people has just been about power. With Democrats, it's just been about power. It is not about, if he's not competent to run another 4 years, why is he the president right now?
Right.
He should step down right now. You don't hear any of that.
If he was polling 3 points ahead, if he was winning the swing states, they wouldn't be calling for him to go. They wouldn't care how demented he looked on TV.
That's a great point, and we know that very, very definitively because it is the story of the last 4 years. It was clear years ago. We all knew it. It's gotten, incredibly bad, and so it's impossible for them to ignore. It became impossible for the media to ignore. But we did know this years ago, and they were happy to cling to power because he was the only vehicle for the Democratic Party to beat Donald Trump, they felt, because everybody else was so radical.
No question. Now the survey data, here's what we're finding out in polling today. There's a new Emerson poll out that shows in the swing states that Trump is dominating all of them. Here we go. Arizona, Trump +7. Georgia, Trump +6. Michigan, Trump +3. Nevada, Trump +5. North Carolina, Trump +7. Pennsylvania, Trump +5. Wisconsin, Trump +5. This is quite obviously why they want to eject Biden. If Trump dominates in all of these states, it's game, set, match. He wins this election easily. I just saw that Brett Baer at the Fox News Channel had a conversation with President Trump today, and he's reporting that in the speech tonight, allotted for 90 minutes, but we'll see how long Trump goes, he is not going to be using this word, Biden. The name Biden will not appear once tonight in Trump's speech, according to Brett's reporting. What does that tell you, Emily?
It tells me that's a change. I actually wrote about this for UnHerd earlier this week in a totally different angle, which was there was a concerted effort to continue running against Biden here at the RNC. There was chants of Joe must go that broke out often on the convention floor. There was a lot of talk of Bidenflation and Biden migrant crime. But, I think what Donald Trump is realizing, A, is that he can sort of be a transcendent figure in politics, given what's happened to him over the course of the last week, and B, that the writing is on the wall for Biden. I think a lot of people in the Republican Party had a almost wishful thinking about how Democrats were reacting to Biden, that they're just going to prop him up, and as Ron DeSantis said here earlier this week, have this weekend at Bernie's candidacy. But to some extent, I think that's because they knew Biden is so severely politically crippled by the last couple of weeks of his administration that they want to run against Joe Biden. That's basically looks like it's not going to happen at this point. So Trump, the kind of master strategist, is adapting. Yeah,
he is. And it also suggests that the speech is going to be very forward-looking. I mean, in order to talk, if you were dwelling on the past a lot, the past 4 years, you'd probably have to bring up Biden at least once. It sounds to me like President Trump is preparing a very forward-looking address for this evening.
I've gotten that sense all week. And one of the interesting things is that nobody knows what Donald Trump is going to say, except for maybe Brett Baer knows a little at this point. But other than that, it's a huge outstanding variable as we kind of look to see, as the dust settles at the convention, what happened. And it's been like almost reality TV. You really don't know what he's going to come out and say, except for, I think one of the big clues is he's been fairly stoic. These, harrowing stories of trauma that happened at a rally just a couple of days ago, he sat there really stoically and hasn't said a lot on Truth Social. He hasn't been, certainly hasn't been like milking it in any way whatsoever, has been sort of parsimonious with his applause for other speakers. And just watching his body language, I think he's really trying to play this close to the vest. And so that to me seems like a clue that he is going to try to be sort of soaring and transcendent when he speaks tonight.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. How many of these Republican conventions have you been at, Emily?
This is my first one. I had to go because it's Milwaukee.
Oh, okay. I see. First of all, I was going to ask you to compare them because from my perspective, sitting from the outside, I'm not at this one. I'm looking at the first of all, the unity in the room, the energy in the room, and the excitement about what comes next. It feels different. It definitely feels different to me. And I was at the last two Republican conventions. Now I get to watch this one from afar. But this one feels like it's got some extra intensity. And the people in that room are reacting really well to each of the presenters who step out on stage, including last night, the Gold Star families arrived, the families of the fallen from Afghanistan. And I've got to say, it's a tearjerker to watch them speak. And they were speaking with care about their loved ones, anger about the way they were treated by Biden, hopefulness for the future, support for Trump. And they just got the most welcome reaction from that crowd last night.
Yeah, no, I usually avoid these things like the plague, but I have found this one to be pretty interesting. And one thing, just to confirm the point that you're making, I heard as I was walking the halls of the convention center, which were pretty empty earlier today, people were doing sound tests and preparing. I overheard a pretty big, media figure tell another pretty big media figure, both of them on the right, that this is the best convention that this person had ever been to. And this person has been to many, many conventions. And that person said that this was the best one. And that was, I just hearing that was really interesting because I think it does come down to Trump himself. There's just a sense of gravity that he's the man for the moment.
Yeah.
And they already have T-shirts with the fist raised in the air printed on them, and everybody's ready to go for Trump.
That's cool. Last thing about the convention, and I want your perspective on this. A couple of Republican senators were chasing down the Secret Service director yesterday, Kim Cheatle, who was at the convention. Among them, Marsha Blackburn, John Barrasso, and some others. And my impression of them chasing her down and demanding answers, after I watched the video of it, I said to myself, I was sitting watching the video, and I go, hell yes, finally. There's something. It's to the point where normally a senator is supposed to be like the sober elder statesman. You're not supposed to get excited or get involved in any of this. Everyone all of a sudden has fight in them. Like I'm watching Marsha Blackburn chase the Secret Service director down the hallway and say, answer my damn questions. What happened? How did you get a president almost assassinated? Are you sensing a change even among the elected officials here?
Yeah, I think it's confidence. I think exactly what you're describing is confidence. There's just and maybe it's misplaced because, the country is really divided. But I think people feel after the events of the last week that this is sort of Donald Trump's race to lose. And so that's where you see somebody like a Marsha Blackburn or, my goodness, a John Barrasso,
yes,
to your point, actually feeling like, on the other hand, I don't want to cheapen it because I'm sure they do feel very deeply that this is a grave injustice and that what's happened with Secret Service,
sure,
everyone, Democrats and Republicans want answers to this badly. On the other hand, to go out there so publicly and dramatically, I do think is reflective of this kind of swagger that Republicans have now because they feel like, again, this is Donald Trump's election to lose right now.
Yes. Well, and at the very least, they know they have a base that supports what they're doing, and they're being responsive to that need. It's an election year. I hope it's sustained beyond that. Thank you very much. Emily Jashinsky, good to talk to you as always. Okay, a report that's catching fire now online. Mark Halperin with Newsmax, he is now saying that multiple sources are outlining the apparent state of play on Biden at this time. He reports that the plan is for him to announce his withdrawal from the nomination as early as this weekend, with Sunday the most likely. John Meacham, the historian, Biden speechwriter, the guy who decorated the Oval Office, is apparently polishing up the remarks right now. Biden will not resign the presidency, meaning he'll serve out his term. And Biden will not endorse Kamala Harris. Again, I can't vouch for the quality of this report other than to say that Mark Halperin's making it right now and sort of saying multiple sources are telling him that Biden will not endorse Harris, and that would lead to an open convention with Harris and about 3 others in the running. Superdelegates will not be allowed to vote on the first ballot. The superdelegates are people like Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. They'd have to wait for a later ballot. Kamala Harris is vetting at least 4 possible running mates, including Andy Beshear and possibly Shapiro. That's Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. More on this fluid situation coming up. Look, if this is true, you and I have a lot to talk about tomorrow. An open convention. They know how bad Kamala is. If this is true, it's a real sign they desperately don't want her at the top of the ticket. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.